Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Tianna Voort, and I work with an organization called Dyslexia Canada, where I run a parent support program for families with reading difficulties. Tonight, you've heard from about 15 families, but last year alone, our program helped more than 900 families across Canada, including many here in Manitoba, to find effective support in the public education system. I also run an in-person support group for Manitoba families and have had the privilege of supporting them in their efforts to secure basic and essential reading instruction and support for their children within the public education system. I want to be really clear that reading difficulties, including dyslexia, can be prevented for most children when needs are identified early and targeted instruction begins right away. The window between ages 4 to 7 is crucial for developing foundational word reading skills, like connecting sounds to letters and blending sounds together into words. Yet every day, and I want to make that clear, every day I hear the same story. Parents notice early that something isn't right. Their kid struggles with letters or sounds. They avoid books. They seem lost in class. And they ask for help, and they're told, don't worry, some kids just take longer. Those reassurances cost families something incredibly precious: time. By the time many children finally receive proper support, they are years behind, frustrated, and convinced that they aren't smart. And once a child falls behind, helping them catch up is extremely difficult, time-consuming, and costly. Research from Dr. Maureen Levitt at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto shows that children who receive interventions in grade 1 make twice the gains of those who begin later. Screening lets teachers act before failure, providing targeted supports that keep children on track rather than trying to help them catch up years later. A universal reading screener is a short, reliable check to see whether a child is developing foundational skills needed for reading success. I want to be really clear that this is not an assessment for a learning disability. It simply helps us tell whether there is a possible difficulty. Screening helps teachers to see who's on track to meet future reading goals and who needs more targeted support. I'm very, very happy with the government's announcement last spring of its support for universal screening and for providing guidance to school divisions that they should start screening children this year. This is a very positive development, and I believe that this bill builds on that commitment. It will ensure that every child in the province is screened using vetted screening tools and that this practice is sustained for generations to come. I also want to be really clear that I believe that Manitoba has incredible educators who care deeply about their children and their students, but the assessment tools that they are given often make it impossible for them to catch reading difficulties early. For the past several years, the Manitoba Human Rights Commission has been conducting an investigation into our approach to teaching children to read. And the preliminary findings that they shared in the spring, the thing that stood out to me was actually what Karen said as well. The majority of educators who participated in the survey told the Commission that they were already screening students. Screening wasn't a problem. But when asked to list the tools that they were using for screening, all but few listed assessments that were evidence-based. Almost none were valid or reliable screening tools. Many of the assessments currently being used across the province are subjective, time-consuming, and unreliable. And this has led to many students slipping through the cracks and not getting the support that they need in early years. The results have been widespread and devastating. Provincial data shows that only 45% of grade 3 students in this province meet literacy expectations. And for Indigenous students, that number drops to 28%. In other words, more than half of our grade 3 students are not meeting literacy expectations by the end of primary years. Yet despite years of poor provincial reading results, many education leaders are resistant to change or do not understand what tools are effective for early reading screening and which tools are not. Just last week, I spoke to teachers in a school division in Winnipeg who told me that they wanted to use evidence-based tools to screen students this fall. However, they were forbidden from doing so. Instead, they were required by district leadership to continue using outdated, non-evidence-based reading assessments. In this division, due to resistance from leadership, many children will continue to slip through the cracks and fall behind. In another Manitoba school division, we heard this month that leadership has made a really good faith effort to follow government guidance, but mistakenly chosen a tool called Really Great Reading. This assessment is not evidence-based. It's not intended for screening purposes and does not accurately predict which children will require support. In this division, despite supportive leadership, many children will continue to slip through the cracks and fall behind. There are divisions such as Louis Riel, Hanover, and Evergreen that are using research-validated screeners like Acadians Reading or Dibbles. But the lack of consistency across Manitoba means two children in the same province can have completely different outcomes or chances of being identified and helped. I believe that this inconsistency is what Bill 225 will fix. When screening is universal, every child is assessed, not only those who already seem to be struggling. This is really important because when screening is left to personal discretion, unconscious bias and misconceptions can determine who gets help. When schools fail to identify students at risk, those students are denied timely access to interventions. And I want to be clear that this harm falls most heavily on marginalized and code-protected communities, who often have the least access to private assessments and advocacy. Universal evidence-based screening tools help to correct those inequities. It ensures a child's chance to learn to read doesn't depend on postal code, background, or parental resources. This is why universal screening is important for ensuring equity and is recommended by human rights commissions across Canada. As the Ontario Human Rights Commission report, the Right to Read report concluded, the research on screening for early reading is advanced. The financial cost is minimal, and the impact of current practices is harmful. That applies here in Manitoba today. In my work, I see every day what early identification can do, and I've seen the costs of waiting. The anxiety in parents' voices, tears of 8- and 9-year-olds who already believe that they're stupid, and the loss of confidence that can last a lifetime. Every single one of those 900 children were capable. They just needed someone to notice sooner. Codifying universal screening isn't just good policy, it builds sustainability into literacy reform. It ensures that screening isn't a one-time announcement or pilot. It becomes a lasting commitment that protects every child's right to read. Bill 225 is essential, but it is not the end of this journey. We also need a new language curriculum that includes specific and measurable outcomes and foundational skills, funding to implement interventions that are evidence-based, progress monitoring to track the effectiveness of these interventions to ensure that students who are below benchmark are getting the supports they need to close the gap, and better standards for teacher training to ensure that future teachers are taught about evidence-based practices for teaching and assessing reading. Imagine a Manitoba where every K-3 classroom begins the year with a quick, reliable check of reading skills, where teachers have clear data to guide instruction, where parents understand their child's reading progress, and where children receive help before frustration and shame sets in. That's what Bill 225 makes possible. It shifts our system from reactive to proactive, from waiting until children fail to ensuring that they never fall behind in the first place. Thank you, and I hope to see you all at the Manitoba Human Rights Commission's Right to Read release on October 30th. I hope that together we can ensure that no child in this province is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Voort. Emily Lamoureux. Thank you, Honourable Chairperson, and thank you for your presentation. This is not a question. I just want to, again, thank you for your presentation and the work that you're doing with Dyslexia Canada. And just say happy International Dyslexia Awareness Day to everyone here. I'm sorry I didn't get the memo to wear red, but I totally would have. I appreciate you pointing out, though, that the reality is there are still a lot of not evidence-based screening still going on despite the government's directive. And again, this just echoes the importance of why it needs to be legislated. Saying it in a press release is not enough. We need to make it official and legit, so no matter what happens, the children going through school is not going to change for them from year to year. Thank you.
Would you like to respond to that, Ms. Voort?
No, I would echo your sentiment that, you know, the directive from the government is a great start, but we've already seen how a lack of clear direction has already led to some challenges within school boards across the province, and hopefully Bill 225 can help to set those on a clear path.
Emily Blasco.
Thank you so much for your work. It's clearly a passion of yours, or you fake it really well. But I was just curious. You've engaged with like school divisions. You're here on the political side. I'm curious if in your role you've had conversations with universities and colleges in their training of teachers, and how those conversations have started, or if they have started, and how they're going.
Yeah.
Ms. Voort? Sorry. That's okay. It's procedural. I just need to recognize you so Hansard catches it. Ms. Voort.
No, that's a really great question. So Dyslexia Canada is a non-for-profit organization. I specialize in working with families, and so that's my job. All day long I work with families. I do know that our executive director has engaged with universities across Canada. I'm not sure how receptive the universities in Manitoba have been, but you could send her an email, and I'm sure that she would be happy to answer that question for you. Yeah.
Emily Cook.
Hi, Mrs. Voort. Thank you for coming and for all the work you do with Dyslexia Canada. You touched on some of the differences between the bill and the government's directive in your presentation. And one of the reasons that I like my colleague's bill and support this bill is that it takes the directive a step further in requiring the results to be provided to the family within 30 days and for further follow-up and resources to be allocated. I just wondered if you could speak to the value and importance of those two things specifically.
Yes.
Mrs. Voort. I also need to do my job here. So.
Didn't want to get in trouble. No, I think that this is really important, right? I think there's a sentiment from the schools and the school divisions that teachers are doing their best, and we know that teachers are doing their best to communicate that with parents, but it doesn't always happen without a directive. And so most of the parents that I speak to, at some point, teachers are taking them aside and saying kind of behind the table, I think there might be a problem, but don't say it was me. And so it is really important that we empower teachers to be able to share that information. I don't think that the results of the screening assessment are going to be much different than the provincial assessment. I think we're going to see, the majority of students not at benchmark. And I guess one of my fears is that if there is no directive to share that information with parents, that school boards won't want to share with 50% of students that they're not meeting benchmarks. But that's really important information for parents to know. So mandating that parents are given that information so that they can make timely decisions about their child's education is really important.
Thank you, Mrs. Voort. Are there